Thursday, October 15th. And so we come to Judges chapter 13, and it begins in oh so familiar a way. Again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Philistines, who oppressed them for 40 years. Throughout Judges, we've heard the same story. At the beginning, it was clear that God had a plan for the Israelites to be blessed, to take the land that he intended to give to them. But because of their disobedience, because they could not follow simple instructions, the land was not given to them. And they were overrun and they lost battles simply because they could not do what God wanted them to do, because they did evil in God's sight. And then we hear the stories of judges being raised when the people of Israel realize that their suffering is their own fault, and they cry out to God and ask for his help, and he sends them a judge, and they win the battle, or they lead the people of Israel, or they gain all that God intended for them to gain because they're following God's instructions. Then peace comes. But no sooner does the judge die and the people forget. They have such short memories. This time, they've been oppressed by the Philistines for 40 years. 40 years it takes them to cry out. 40 years before God sees his way to providing them with the judge that will give them the opportunity to follow and to win the victory once more. But in this story in particular, there are very particular instructions to be followed. It's almost as if God is saying, look, follow these instructions to the letter, and then I'll show you the way I intend to lead you into all the blessing that I have for you, the victory that I have for you, the way I intend to show you that my way is the best way. Now, because of Mum's funeral, I've had the grandchildren staying here. Oh, and it was a delight to see them, to have them here, however noisy and chaotic it got. But once you're a parent or a grandparent, there's a lesson you soon learn. And that's, if you say you're going to punish them, however light a punishment it may be, or if you say there are going to be consequences for them not doing what they're asked to do, or for them fighting, or for them being selfish, whatever consequence it is you threaten them with, if they are disobedient, if they continue to be naughty, if they continue to fight with their brother or sister, then you have to see the consequence through. Because if you don't, then next time there's no incentive for them to pay any attention whatsoever. And so it is with God in Judges. Every time he gives them the opportunity to do what is right. But it's clear, it's always clear that if they don't do what's right, there will be consequences. And God ensures that he sees his word through. Just as much as he does for good, sometimes the consequences are less pleasant. It just made me think. We know that from New Testament times, from the time that God sent Jesus to be his final word, his final instruction, if you like, that there is but one path to reconciliation with God. And we also know, any of us that have ever read anything about the persecuted church, or know anyone who's suffered with COVID or cancer, or who has had terrible illness and suffering in their lives, or abuse in their lives, or been punished in persecution because of their faith. We know that there is not a simple equation between obedience and following Jesus and a healthy, wealthy, prosperous lifestyle. There are some who would teach that. There are some who would say that if you're suffering, or if you're sick, or if you're not living in God's blessing all the time, then it must be your fault. It must be because of your disobedience. It must be because you are failing or falling into sin. I don't believe that equation is black and white. But I do believe that there is a connection between our faithfulness and the way in which God blesses us. I cannot promise you that the blessing will be instantaneous. I cannot even promise you that the blessing will come in this lifetime. But I can promise you that God rewards our faithfulness. And whether the reward is on this earth or in heaven, God notices. God is paying attention. And I also know that we speak frequently of God's unconditional love. And it is his grace that is poured out and available to all that makes our relationship with him so precious, because we can't earn it. We can't buy it. It is only by grace that we are saved. But that unconditional love is kind of unconditionally conditional. Does that make sense? Because there is only one way to access the full blessing, the full gifting of God. And that is through faith in Jesus. God loves his creation. He loves all his creatures. But he can only bestow the full grace and the full gifting and the full blessing that he intends to bestow if we trust in Jesus and if we accept his death for ourselves. Let me be clear. I don't think God has got a cup of blessing in one hand and a cup of punishment in another. And if we so much as stray from the path he set out before us, there's always a second best. There will always be a punishment to be bestowed. We will never see the full blessing if we are disobedient, because that's not the grace of God that I recognize. But my thought for today is this. Are there things that God is leading you towards, urging you to notice? Are there things that God is placing in front of you, instructions, suggestions, leadings, guidance, warnings, challenges, that you do know, that you have noticed, you just haven't decided to follow? Give it a thought. Could there be a blessing that you're missing out on? Could there be a consequence that will be missed because you haven't been obedient? Or could there be a consequence that you would like to miss, but because you haven't paid attention and because you haven't followed, God in his justice and his mercy in the teaching will allow you to go through because you've been disobedient? There is an equation. It's not simple. So I guess my thought for today is this. Why take the chance? Whenever possible, ask for clarity. Be sure that you know what it is God is asking of you by all means. But as you take each step, be sure that you're taking a step toward God's blessing, toward God's plan. Because on this earth or in the next, there is a reward for those that trust him, follow him, and do what he asks. Don't be handed over to anyone for 4 minutes or 4 days or 4 weeks, let alone 40 years, just for want of doing it your way. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.